Hey everybody, it's Heather and welcome to Spooky Sunday at Mystic Musings. Today we are going to talk about the Bell Witch. So in the early 1800s, John Bell and his family moved to Tennessee. They were in Robertson County and he would eventually acquire more and more land, so they kind of had like their own huge setup out there. He had about 328 acres, so when I say huge, I mean like huge. In 1817, John was in his cornfield and he saw this creature. So it had like the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. He did what anyone would have done in his situation and he shot at it. It ran off. I guess he was a terrible shot. So it disappeared and he just kind of forgot about it until dinner time. He and his family were all sitting around and they started to hear this pounding. There were beating sounds coming from outside their log home. They tried to just dismiss it at first, but the sounds continued into the night. And so finally, every time they would happen, Bell would run all around his house trying to look for whatever animal or trespasser was the culprit of this noise, and he never could find any. It wasn't long before the activity amped up. So they went from hearing things to the children would awake screaming, saying that rats were gnawing at their bedposts, that their covers were being ripped off of them as they slept. And the Bells began hearing whispers and what sounded like an elderly woman singing hymns. The youngest daughter, Betsy, became the prime target, and she would be slapped so severely that she would have welts all over her body, welts and bruises, and I mean, it looked like she had been in a terrible fight. Bell made his family promise to keep whatever it was that was happening a secret. I don't really think it's all that surprising, because if you were being tormented by something that you couldn't see or explain, you probably wouldn't be like telling the whole world, especially not in the 1800s. But his neighbor, he did finally just sort of vent to him, and his neighbor and his neighbor's wife were like, well, you don't know if we believe you. So they came over to stay the night, and they were quick believers. I mean, they were tormented all through the night. They were slapped. His neighbor, Johnston, was so scared and frustrated and confused that when all this was happening, he sprang out of bed and he screamed, "In the name of the Lord, what do you want?" And there was no reply, but things seemed to sort of calm down after that. The entity's voice, which at first had been like a very low whisper, became more and more firm and clear and concise. The family could hear it quoting scripture. It carried on intelligent conversations, and at one time, perhaps the most unnerving, it actually quoted verbatim 2 sermons that had been preached on the same day at the same time, like 17 miles apart from each other. Word of the haunting spread to Andrew Jackson, and so he came to check it out. We already talked about this in my video about historical figures who had some sort of interaction with the occult, so I'll skip ahead to sum it up. He was a believer and said he'd rather fight the British in New Orleans than spend another night in that house. Fast forward. The Betsy Bell became interested in Joshua Gardner. He was apparently interested in her too, and the couple decided to get married. The entity told Betsy this was a terrible mistake. She needed to not do that. The couple had shared a teacher at some point. His name was Richard Powell, and there was rumor that he dabbled in the occult and more specifically sort of the evil side of it. He was 11 years older than Betsy and had expressed apparently pretty serious interest in marrying her when she was old enough. That's not weird. And so some people thought, maybe he was behind some of this, maybe not, but interesting theory. So it got so bad that Betsy and Joshua could not go anywhere without this entity following them, without it harassing them. Finally, on Easter Monday in 1821, Betsy decided that she couldn't handle it anymore. She had Joshua meet her at the river, and she broke off their engagement. The activity decreased a bit after that, because for a while it had been, yelling at her not to marry this guy. But the entity continued to express a severe hatred for John Bell and vowed to kill him. So he had been experiencing odd twitches in his face and difficulty swallowing for some time, about a year. And by the fall of 1820, his declining health left him on bed rest. Anytime he would try to get up, go somewhere, as soon as he put his shoes on, the entity would pull them off and throw them across the room. Which to me sort of sounds like she was just trying to take care of him. Like, no, you're supposed to be on bed rest. Take your shoes off, lie down. But, she had kind of promised to kill him, so moving on. He experienced seizures, and while these seizures were happening, the witch would slap his face, which is just like, that's a little bit of overkill, okay? That's rude. So John did die in December of 1820 after slipping into a coma. The family found a small vial of unidentified liquid in the cupboard. John Bell Jr. gave some to the cat, who immediately dropped dead. Poor cat. And so he threw this vial into the fireplace, where it exploded into green flames. When this all happened, the witch's voice cried out, I gave old Jack a big dose of that and it fixed him. So, she was kind of a jerk. At the funeral, the entity actually laughed very loudly and it began singing a song about a bottle of brandy. She did not stop doing all this and making such a commotion until the very last mourner left. After that, though, now that old John was dead, the haunting almost ceased altogether. The next year, 1821, the entity did visit John Bell's widow, Lucy, and told her that it would return in 7 years, which it did. At that time, the entity discussed John Bell Jr. mostly, and the origin of life, civilizations, Christianity, the need for a mass spiritual awakening. It also predicted the Civil War and other events that came very, very true. The entity said farewell after it had been there for 3 weeks. Talk about a house guest you wish would leave. It said that it would visit John Bell's descendant 107 years later. This would have been Nashville physician Charles Bailey Bell, and he did write a book about the Bell Witch and everything that had happened with his family, but he died in 1945, which 1935 would have been when the witch came back, and he hadn't followed up with anybody as to whether or not that happened, and then he died in 1945, so perhaps we'll never know. Strange things still happen out on the farm today. It is still there if you just really want to go. There are sounds of people talking, children laughing, lights dance through the fields, which sounds really pretty, right? But I guess it's not. And human-like figures show up in photographs. This is one of the most documented cases of a historical haunting. The only one thing anyone can agree on is that there was something very wrong with this house. Though what it was remains a mystery. So there you have it. The Bell Witch is the inspiration for quite a few movies. I hope you enjoyed this. If any of you have been out there, since the farm is still around, I would love to hear if anything weird happened, if you took any pictures that came out with some people in it that weren't there. But regardless, pretty spooky stuff. So anyway, I will see you guys on Friday, and I hope that you at least learned something creepy today. I will see you later. I hope the rest of your weekend is great. Bye, guys.